Good evening, we're going to get started. Welcome to our March meeting of the Conservation Commission. For minutes, we've got two sets, January and February. Hey! All right. Perfect timing, we need you to talk about the January minutes.
Okay. I read them and thought they were just fine.
So did I. Any other commentary on the minutes? Okay. Well then, I suppose anyone
Move to approve.
move to approve, yeah. Any seconds?
Second.
There you go, all in favor? All right.
General will abstain.
All right, and so for February, did everyone get a chance to see them?
We did.
Yes. Any commentary, any errors and omissions?
Did not note any.
All right, so then I'll entertain a motion to accept them.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of February 19th and place them on file.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have to abstain, I wasn't here.
Same vote.
3 and 3. There we go.
It's all right.
All right, so good, that's minutes. Let's get into the hearings. We have a continued NOI for Brian and Kelly Kelly at 335th Street, and we're going to be, they've asked to be continued until next meeting.
They requested a continuance on 3/18.
So,
Move to continue.
Second it?
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, Plum Blue, we haven't heard from in a little while. They have a continued NOI to build a single-family home at 17C Fordham Way.
It would be my recommendation that we drop them off the agenda without prejudice, pending them meeting their legal requirements for coming back on. I've called them about 4 months ago, and I reminded them that they needed to actively contact the commission and continue their hearing each and every month, and I haven't heard from them now for 3 months. So this doesn't put them in jeopardy. They would have to re-notify anyway. They've been gone so long, so we can hang on to this for 2 years, but again, it's my recommendation to drop it from the agenda.
So I'll entertain a motion
So
to,
moved.
all right.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have a continued NOI from the town of Newbury at 14th Street to improve the right-of-way and construct an emergency access driveway, and the town has asked to be continued.
They've asked to be continued to the April 16th date, and that would be my recommendation.
Do you want to just?
Move to continue.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and we have Jacqueline McKenna at 11 Riverside has a continued NOI to replace a deck platform, conduct landscape work, and after the fact approval for repairs to an existing revetment, and she has also gotten in touch with us and asked to be continued.
She did, and I move that we continue the hearing to the April 16th date.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, check, check, check. All right, and now Lori Muller. Did I do that too badly?
No,
All right,
no,
great.
try to walk that.
Yeah, so this is 116 Old Point, continued NOI to construct a single-story addition to an existing single-family home.
So, I have answering some of your questions from last time I was there. I had Ed Dixon do the survey, noting where we're gonna mitigate, for plantings, and what the numbers are.
Gotcha.
And what's underneath here, that we subtract it out. So all those numbers are over there,
Excellent.
where we're planning on planting, and all around there, we come out with a positive.
Excellent. Okay. Positive 67 feet. Okay.
And then I have my elevation, and my
Oh,
pylon,
perfect.
and my physical reference drawing set.
Okay. islands were, but these are wood, aren't they, under the porch? That's why
The
they're,
wood
so
under
they
the
steel under
porch
here
and
and wood
steel
under
the
here.
house.
Okay.
And in here are the pylon drawings.
Okay. Laurie, have you sent this off to DEP?
I'm going to send to EP a whole
All right.
copy, I just got this today.
Okay.
And,
Because they did,
they wrote back and did.
so you got that, there's
No,
no number?
I didn't, but I
Oh.
figured they wrote back and said, what is going on?
Well, that's kind of what it is, it's kind of what's going on, only in their language.
Yeah, okay. So I'm planning on sending them this with a letter, tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Do they need this information about the sewer, water and sewer? You had asked about the water and sewer pipe, and I called Jamie Tupelo, and he said,
You know, I really don't think they need it, it's not a 310 CMR issue, but if someone looks at it and they see septic line and a pipe, and there's
there might
this
be a
as an
question.
attachment,
Okay.
it certainly
Yeah, that
covers
makes
it,
it
and it,
clear.
yeah.
I just don't wanna make it more confusing.
No, I don't think that's more confusing, it's just
Alright.
two sentences or a sentence, two
Okay.
sentences.
So, considering the location of where we're talking about,
Yeah,
do you know how the Arrowwood viburnum, the big leaf hydrangea, and the high bush blueberry tend to do out there? High bush blueberry doesn't feel to me maybe like,
the high bush might have trouble, but I think the other two will be all right, and I'm pretty sure the
Really?
hydrangea will be all right.
What would be
Yeah.
the problem with the high bush?
I just feel like it's usual places where you see it thriving don't get such a desiccating wind on such a frequent basis. It's
Okay.
maybe just not a tough enough shrub. I mean, I don't know, that's why I asked the question. It just
Yeah.
strikes me that maybe it's not gonna,
So,
I
so
would
can we
say-
take it out of that list? We might still add it.
Yeah.
Right,
And, you know,
I would put
separately.
some over here, where the sun's just,
I don't know if the numbers are really high, if you're doing like 15 of them or something, but,
No, we
no,
have
we're
two
gonna do
in our,
mixtures.
in our existing property in Reading that we wanted to bring with us.
Well,
We'd
those
like
two
them.
are doing really well.
Yeah.
But they don't get the wind, but the wind is all pretty much over here, it's kind of,
you're gonna tuck it in kinda,
yeah.
okay. Well, just, mayor speaking, maybe keep an eye on it,
Yeah,
just,
no,
for your own
that's-
sake, if you're gonna make the effort. to do
Right,
it.
make the effort,
Yeah.
because we have a couple of beautiful ones.
what else are you planting in here?
Um,
Is there gonna be American beach grass in here? You're gonna put doom?
I wanna do a combination of coastal plantings, and so I'm gonna look at your list, and I'm gonna talk to a coastal landscaper and get things picked out.
Okay.
So there'll be grasses, like the pretty grasses that you were talking about,
Yep.
and shrubs, and possibly a couple of trees.
Okay. No top dressing, no bark mulch, that
Okay.
type of thing.
Yeah.
Trouble with that is it puts organics in the top layer of the soil down
Okay.
there, and then it does kind of ruin the sand for those
Okay.
deep-rooted plants that need to get away from that heat. And they
Okay,
stay shallow-rooted because the food's up there and there's moisture up there. And then
Okay.
when it really dries out, they don't do so well, because
Oh.
they're not down in that moist sand.
okay, all right.
Any numbers of these plantings?
Numbers of the plants.
Yeah, because what I'm kind of trying to get at is the density and the coverage of the ground. Really what this is about trapping the sand and keeping the sand on the site. So if it's all high material, then you're kind of missing that
The
ground layer.
lower?
Yeah, so you probably want to look at some different layers of vegetation as you look,
I
different
wanna-
heights of vegetation.
I wanna do different heights, of vegetation, I don't wanna do just all bushes, but those were the bushes that I immediately
Okay.
wanted to plant.
And that's okay. I think we're gonna need some kind of numbers and densities to try and
Okay.
figure out
Yeah.
what the coverage is gonna be
And
here.
I think
How do I
too,
do that?
Well, you take this section right here, and
Yeah.
it's X square feet, and it's X feet long.
Yeah,
And I look at my nursery selection, and my high bush blueberry is going to grow out and mature at such.
right,
And then maybe I've got a smaller plant that just sits at the foot of it, and maybe another one here. And then my next, how many can I put in there so that when they're mature, they don't look ridiculous, they're not all
Right.
crammed in,
yeah.
but they give you enough at the beginning to satisfy the purpose of why you're putting them in.
Okay.
yeah, and we want these to succeed as much as you do, you don't want to plant them twice, right?
No,
right?
I-
Yeah.
So,
No,
No.
they're expensive.
yeah, it's
You
a
know?
lot of bother and a lot of money, and, you know, if we can help you figure out what's gonna thrive there, you know, we're happy to do that.
Good idea.
Should we talk to, you wanted to talk to the landscape, who knows this stuff, right? Should we just have them put together a plan?
For the plants.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know who to talk to.
Yeah,
Figure it out.
well, we saw that list on the Massachusetts.
Well, yeah.
And you said you've got a list on the
I've got a-
Concom website,
Yeah,
or is
I've
it
got
in the
a
office?
couple of lists. I
Right.
think we've got one on our
You
website.
do,
Yeah,
with a
Okay.
lot
yes.
to choose from.
Okay, let's call some,
Okay.
we can do that.
Okay. And other than that, I mean, I haven't had much time to look at this, this is the
Yeah.
first time I've seen it, but it looks like you've got your elevation, what's the, quarter inches equals a foot, so that's what, 3 feet off the ground at the closest point?
No, it's, at the closest point, it's more like, close to 5 feet off the ground.
The closest one.
Right here?
At the
Well,
closest point to the house,
It's
or to
it's a
the,
quarter inch.
oh, to the ground, it's 25 inches.
Okay, all right, that's,
So this is 25 inches, and this is almost 5 feet.
that makes sense, that makes sense. And there's nothing gonna go on these, they're gonna stay open just like they are.
Right.
That's perfect.
What's the standard in this case for what it should have been? Is it 24 inches, or like, what's the relevance of the 25?
The 24 inches is your separation between your closest point of land and your closest horizontal member. It's full of toral drift. So that's why you lift these up. And, you know, does the air still compress against the side of the house? Sure it does. Does this eliminate some of the scour that you would get on the corners of buildings and the buildup on the other sides? Yeah, it does, and that's the purpose of this. So you're either gonna be elevated above the flood value or 2 feet above, whichever is closer. You'll never be less than 2 feet, unless there's a special circumstance like the elevator was last month.
What's that come out of?
That doesn't come out of anywhere. That comes out of allowing the dune to move. So you're not gonna look up in 310 CMR and see 2 feet allows the dune
Right.
to move. That's just a kind of a negotiation that's been accepted and has been accepted on Plum Island now for maybe 20 years.
Okay,
DEP has agreed that we're gonna have a 2-foot separation.
okay. Found out what? Trying to remember it.
Yeah, I did look at the DEP comments and, they wanted the flood zone on the plan.
Yeah, they want the flood zone on the plan, which should be easy for you to put on. It's not on here?
We had a, from, at Dixon, we had a flood zone mapped on that. I don't think we brought that down.
No.
Yeah, we had one.
Did they want it on top of this?
Well,
Or
I think
some-
Well, I think-
So there's some here, or the actual flood zone
Zones.
ratings.
what the base flood elevation is.
It
in
should be
this
30, well, it
particular-
should be
Yeah.
13 then.
So we're above the base flood elevation where we're putting the addition.
Yeah, and whether it's another sheet or on top of that sheet,
It's
So
sort
it's
of,
marked,
as long as they know you're
I think
including
you're
it.
talking about the elevation plan that he had done prior.
yeah, that's what I thought, and some of it's on here. So
But
they
not all
show,
of it.
they show 13 feet elevation right here. So here's 12 and 11, 10, 9,
So it's
Yeah.
getting.
but we're up in the high, we're on a hill here. So it's 13 up to,
if I remember correctly, the house is halfway in or something
Yes.
like that. It goes
Right.
through the center
goes
of one,
right-
yeah, it goes through one section of the house, because I've looked
Yeah.
at it. I've seen it
you went and
somewhere.
looked at it when we first came by.
Might have looked at it online on my
Yes,
map, I
you
think.
did.
You
So
Yeah.
the actual addition is in an X zone?
Yes, yes. And that's really, you know, DEP, they're gonna want it, so put it, they've asked for it. I don't
Okay.
think it's something you wanna fight over.
No.
But it's really up to the building department, not
Okay.
them relative to the flood zone, but they wanna see it, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, do they want to see it marked X and where the X zone is, or do they just want the base flood elevation numbers?
That's a real good question. If I knew what they wanted,
Okay.
it'd be
We'll
much
find
more
out.
effective.
I know.
No, it's just been traditional for us, it's, you know, put the flood value there and you 2 feet up.
Okay,
It sounds like you got it covered, but.
yeah, we do,
It's good
because
to
we're
have it
2
on that
feet up,
plan.
we're 2 feet up from, about the 16-foot level, which is 3 foot above the base flood elevation,
Yeah, but
right?
it's really the corner of your.
Yeah, because this is 5 feet above, about 5
Yeah,
feet.
you know, it's fine, it's just.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're well above.
Okay.
You're somewhere around 4 feet above base elevation there,
Yeah.
so, you know, you're
All
about.
right, we'll have Ed Dixon take care of that.
So, any other comments? It sounds like we kind
I-
of exhausted ourselves here a little bit.
I think so. I would like a little more time with this plan, just to be able to look at it, make sure I didn't miss anything. I hate looking at a plan for 5 minutes. It doesn't, I know I'm gonna miss something. Yeah, and I was gonna give you the option anyway of keeping your hearing open until you hear from DEP, and that way you still have the ability to react to any comments they have.
Okay.
You know, it'll allow you to come in, if we close your hearing contingent upon you getting that number and these other things,
Yeah.
we may be satisfied, but you may have to come back with something, so
Okay.
it doesn't really, it doesn't move you forward very much to close the hearing tonight, I don't think.
Okay. All right, so plans and elevation and
Yeah,
get this
your flood zone,
information
put your
to
flood zone in,
DEP.
yes,
Yeah, flood zone.
flood zones and mark that on the map here. And anything that you do with your planting schedule,
Yeah.
they'd probably like also. And
Sure.
from a practical standpoint, anything you give to us, you're required to send to them anyway.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right,
Alright, so,
Any questions?
So if we get all that together and we're at the next meeting, then we'll be able to likely get it, are we likely to get a resolution at that point? Is that
I
how?
think we're certainly gonna be satisfied at the
Okay.
next meeting, I would
Okay.
As long
imagine.
as
And
DEP
don't have-
satisfied,
Yes, what we
Okay.
need from them is that number. It doesn't matter if we're satisfied or not, if they don't give us the DEP number, we can't write you an order of conditions. So
okay,
satisfying them gets the number, but satisfying them doesn't mean that they approve of the plan. It
okay,
only means there's enough information for them to release the DEP number.
okay,
After that, they don't appeal it or they can't appeal it until we write an order of conditions. Because at that point, until we write that order, they don't know if our order is gonna protect the interests of the act or not.
all right. Okay. And we're gonna be talking to the building department in April, their April
Right.
meeting. So they'll all come together probably in April. All right,
For zoning,
yeah,
yeah.
so can I
Now,
leave
zoning
you?
takes a while, I don't know if you wanna get that, you can run parallel courses, you know, and you could get this zoning thing started. And it's usually a pretty good idea when you have dual process to run them together anyway. Even
okay.
the zoning board of appeals could say, well, you know something, we don't like this way, this needs to be that way. I don't see any red flags on this project,
Mhm.
but it's possible, it's
Okay.
process.
Okay,
So the sooner you get into them and understand what they need, which
well,
may be nothing.
hopefully, I'm gonna go see them on, I'm gonna submit my application on March 25th, which is Monday.
Okay.
To get in the April,
Excellent, so you get your denial from Sam,
yeah,
okay,
I
good,
already have that.
all right.
And so, and now that I have my working drawings, I can put all that together.
Yep.
And then start that process at the same time I do this.
Okay,
I'm gonna leave you these 2 copies.
Please.
And I'm gonna take this copy
Yep.
for DEP.
excellent, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do you want to vote on take a vote on a continuance?
well, I was gonna make sure the audience didn't want to say anything, but.
That's very nice of you, and I think you should do that.
Yeah, it seems appropriate. Is there anybody out there in the audience who'd like to make any observations, any comments on this? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
So at this point, I would accept a motion to continue this to the April meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. 5 up. All right, so we have a continued NOI from Governor Dummer Academy on Old Road to widen, repair, and repave portions of Old Road. Hello.
You doing? Good, thank you.
Usually, so this is just a reference plan at this point.
Yeah, please.
To last year,
Actually, just, can you hold on a second, I just wanna ask a technical question. So these guys were here last time, so it's a continued,
Yes.
and usually when you ask people to state their name for the record, that kind of thing, because we're continuing, is that relevant?
Well, you
Like, should
still,
we say like, excuse me, can you state your name for the record kind of
well,
thing?
what you're gonna do is you're gonna read their hearing. And so that's going to introduce them, and if you want their individual names for the record, absolutely, yeah.
Alright, so, alright, I should.
It's your hearing.
Well, I mean, it's more of a curiosity on the technicality than,
Yeah, no, I
I
hear
mean,
you.
we know who they are, they were here last time, no big deal. Anyway, so, sorry guys, thank you, go on. I did read that,
Oh, okay.
but he's not Governor Dummer.
For the record, Tom Woodruff, representing Governor
Thanks.
Dummer County.
Thanks, Governor.
And for the record, Dennis Hamel from now GM2C, CE, which is an extension of Cameron Engineering. We got bought out by GM2, so, but we're still Cameron Engineering.
Good for you.
Anyway, since our last meeting, you had requested a letter from, I believe you have this to a copy of it here.
Yep.
From the wetland scientists who delineated the wetlands here on the issue of the vernal pool and having construction in the vicinity of it. Basically states that the damage to the vernal pool or the hindrance to it was when they originally constructed the road. Adding to it and widening it has little effect on it because of the distance away from the road. It's not right on the road. So she feels that, that it has good tree cover, which is one of the important things for a vernal pool. It has water, and it has some vegetated wetlands, but also has some ice uplands around it. It needs all of those things. And any runoff from there, by the time it gets to there, the temperature should be an insignificant difference. And there's, we're using erosion control during construction, so it should be, good on that stage of it. And that's the gist of it without getting into the detail.
I've read the letter and I concur, I agree. I think that was one issue, and I think the only other issue we had was for Tom, and he responded on the culverts. Do you want to talk about
Sure,
the culverts
yeah,
for a
just
minute?
the condition of the culverts, I took a look at them, they were covered in some leaf debris, but they're all modern corrugated PVC and look to be in functional condition, and like they won't need to be replaced when we do the road work.
I think that was our two issues for these folks.
I am just thinking, so not disagreeing with anything that just got said and trying not to bring up a whole new thing, but I'm wondering if as part of the erosion controls for this section, where we know we've got the water flowing sort of here and there, maybe just as an extra layer of insurance to do the compost filters there, because if we've got runoff coming through here, so the compost filters are just a little bit better at removing some of the heavy metals and toxins and things that might be washed out with the road work. And it's not a temperature thing, obviously, but if there's not really much in the way of direct flow to the wetland there, especially the vernal pool, maybe to just do like a 100-foot section or a 200-foot section of the compost tubes.
That's what we're proposing.
Oh,
For
yeah,
all
I
of
need
our, all of our.
the whole thing?
Whole thing.
Oh, well, I need to read the plan first.
No, you can just ask Danny.
Well, fair enough then, I'm fine. Works for me.
Yeah, we find that it is a much better than the silt fence in treatment, as well as letting it filter through, because the silt fence oftentimes ends up being a dam,
Yeah.
and then they always fail.
Did I mention it to this? I was watching a webinar from the Pacific Northwest. There was a graduate student who took road runoff and grew salmon fry in it. And the salmon fry all died. It just was runoff straight off the bridge and just into the bucket. And then they ran the exact same bridge on the next storm. They ran it through a soil mix, and they grew the salmon fry in that, and they all survived to adulthood. It's like 0%, 100% survival. And it just, that was impressive.
Shows you how little it takes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but, does anyone else have any comments or questions? It sounds like, our concerns were addressed, and the one that I had was false anyway. Yeah, they got everything.
And you read your mind.
Yeah.
I don't have any further questions or comments for the applicants.
Okay. You guys like to contribute anything? No?
Good.
All right. Well, then I suppose at this point, what, we would be humoring a motion to write up their order of conditions and close the hearing.
Close the public hearing and go to a motion.
So, anyone want to make the motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the Academy's widening of the old road as presented with the changes.
Seconded.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Cool.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, guys. Good job.
So you did close the public hearing?
Yes. Yes, and we will be writing an order of
And we do
conditions.
have a DEP filing, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so, we do on that one, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
You too.
Yes, well, when this started,
Is
it still?
I wasn't sure.
We'll start on the far
you
end.
know what's funny is I can call them the Governor's Academy, but I can't call you GA. The GDA, it's almost impossible for me to say that, it doesn't work.
It's impossible for me to
Actually
say
had one
Governor's
of your
Academy.
contractors
They were up a
ask
mile
me
from
about
it.
that the other day,
Oh,
like
yeah?
your roofer, I think,
Oh,
yeah. What is it called then? It's like.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
Did you have a chat with them or just read up on the report?
No, I just read that, I didn't call her and talk to her about it, I thought it was fairly well
Yeah, it
written,
looked
and it was
really
pretty
thorough.
clear, yeah. And they're her opinions, and, you know, I gave it weight one way or the other, so
Yeah.
she's pretty reliable. She does a good job flagging.
All right, and finally, we have a new NOI to relocate an existing paved area, perform invasive species management, and rebuild an existing pier at 28 Riverfront. Devin Batchelder?
You got it.
Right.
Probably
It's
be
got a
great.
lot of photos.
Yes, another night you would have been,
This is,
but
you
yeah,
got,
you,
which one's
you
it?
did
Is
well.
this
I think
thing?
that's
This
the
proposed?
first thing.
You look like-
We're good.
So to give you guys maybe a little history on the lot, we bought it back in November, and it was previously used as a rental, and the tenants didn't care about the property as much as one would hope for, and so it needs a little bit of work. So that's kind of what we're proposing to do. I can run through each of the things if you'd like.
Yeah, sure, I mean, while we're all looking around.
Yeah,
Helpful.
absolutely. So this is kind of the proposed one, so if you guys can see too. Alright, so maybe the first thing, they decided that the lawn was a really great driveway, and so there's great big tire ruts, and then they replaced a septic pump, and so actually this whole part of the lawn is completely uneven and unhappy, and so we want to just regrade it and get it back and then reseed it so that it's flat. Another thing is the driveway right now is just one kind of long, straight shot along the side of the property, and it makes parking a little challenging, so we want to relocate it so that it's in front of the barn and make it a little smaller, and then relocate some of that impervious area as a patio off on the side. It won't be getting any closer to the river, but it just kind of subs out some of that impervious area. And then down front, in the two areas that are kind of shaded, it's entirely colonized by invasives. So we'd like to treat. The blue area is the salt marsh, and so that is all Phragmites. So we go in, cut, treat with glyphosate, or I believe that's what we're planning to use. Cut, burn what's been cut, and then just let it grow back from the seed bank that's there. What's shown in green, it's kind of a mix of invasives right now. We've got multiflora rose, there's oriental bittersweet, and Japanese knotweed. It's everything. All you could hope for and more. And actually, it doesn't show here, but that's actually a slope that kind of dives down to the edge of the marsh. So what we want to do is do a shrub layer along the bottom. I think what we had proposed in the specs that you guys have are high tide bush and some beech plum. And then just do a seed mix up on the top, a conservation mix that has some wildflowers in it for the pollinators, but is good for stability. And then the dock is a death trap. So just replace it where it is, just straighten it out, but replace it in kind. Same with the floats. The way that they have it configured, when you walk on it, the floats bow upwards, which isn't the best and not terribly safe, so we want to relocate the floats under the dock and rebuild it, and it would be slightly wider because what they have is very, very narrow. And we did run it all by the harbor master, and he was fine with the configuration. I think, oh, and a tree. There is a very unhappy dead tree. It's labeled tree A, so we'd like to get rid of that guy, as well as tree B, which is actually across the way. It's grown in, it's very large and very close to the septic, and that makes us nervous. So we would just cut and leave the root systems in place.
Devin, for some reason,
Yes.
we have no comments from DEP,
Okay,
but no DEP number.
okay.
They should have commented by now, yeah.
Yeah, which I can't, well, no, we have their comment sheet, they have sent the paper through. They
Wait,
put
it's
the
a blank comment sheet?
Yeah, pretty much. So there's no comments, there's no DEP number, and all they did was list the impacts to the different resource areas at the bottom of the sheet. It's here somewhere, I just,
That doesn't sound right.
That sounds
Nope.
like a,
doesn't it?
Yeah. I feel like they would have made a lot of, I'm curious, the details of the, good on you for taking care of the invasives. Fully support, love the process.
sure.
But, with the steep slope and the river and the tide and all of the different things going on at play, I've got a lot of questions about the stepwise, and
Sure.
I expected they would have too. So,
Yeah, I don't know what, again, I don't kind of know how that slipped out like that. There's usually either a number or comments. There's almost never blanks on both. It doesn't make sense to have a,
yeah, it's like they
give me a
yellow
number or
slip
tell
to
me
the
why you
send
didn't,
button, yeah.
yeah. So, maybe contacting them. We do have a letter from Division of Marine Fisheries, and they have a few concerns about the configuration, not the configuration, the way the dock will be constructed and built, but those are minor things that we work through on a regular basis.
Plus the legs.
Exactly,
Of that
yeah.
nature.
Yeah, and Division of Marine Fisheries now, and I don't know why, they're asking for 1.5 to 1 elevation above the marsh instead of 1 to 1. Maybe they're trying to get you up there a little higher, so
Okay.
3 feet now means 4, I guess. 3 feet wide means 4 feet high.
Okay. That's not really a problem to go taller, so.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah,
isn't.
easy
I
enough.
know, yeah.
I'm sorry, could you just, in the green area where you have this kind of mix of a mess, could you just say again how you're gonna get rid of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of a mix, like you said. So what we would plan to do is go in, cut to the roots, walk around, especially with knotweed, probably go in with a bit of a hand rake and get some of those roots out. If you leave any fragments behind, it's coming right back, so that would be unpleasant. If there's any large root systems on something like the bittersweet, that could just stay in place because that's not going to regrow from the root systems, but it would just be treated based on the plant.
Okay.
I'm a CWS in New Hampshire, so we do these removals quite frequently, so.
Ah, great, thank you.
So you're gonna do it all on your own then?
Yes.
Alright. It's bold.
Yeah,
My job.
That's what she
In that
does.
area.
But I have labor, it's gonna be great.
So we had the governor in, now we got labor.
Right, exactly.
Is this gonna be kind of done in stages, like you're not gonna just sort of clear the whole thing off?
No, this sounds like it's gonna be like a
I can't
Saturday
work that
afternoon.
This isn't gonna be that quick, no, we'll get it cleared, I mean, as much as we can, but,
No, I just, I
no.
didn't worry about an area like that, where you just get rid of everything and try to start anew.
No,
No,
we
we can have
wouldn't be
it on the
planning
table.
It's
to.
gonna be a piecemeal thing.
Maybe it'd be
Yeah,
nice
no.
maybe it'd be nice if you leave the frags in place and do the bank, and then take the frags out.
Sure.
Then bank first, frag second.
And the frags are pretty much your buffer between, there's not gonna be too much that's gonna wash through those frags off that banking.
We'd also put, silt sock or something down,
Exactly, yeah,
to
but
be
I,
safe, silt fence,
I think
silt
between the
sock's
two
kind of
of
a
them-
pest, but,
And are you
Whatever you
proposing
like.
all of this, mechanically, culturally?
the removal?
Yeah.
I mean, cutting down to the stumps would probably have to be done mechanically, mostly because I don't have that much saw power in my life, but the removal of any root systems would be done by hand,
Okay, and so you're doing this all chemical free, is the idea?
except for the frag whiteys, yes.
Okay. How big is your knotweed stick?
This entire half.
And you wanna do that without chemicals?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you get a good seed base in and get it to grow quick, it should be alright. You'll have to go back year after year and pull the seedlings that come up, but
Yeah, I've got a particular thing with knotweed, so, I won't get into it, but, all the power to you, good on you for going for it.
it's not pleasant. It's not fun at all, but, yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of knotweed. So then, if you're gonna do the frag, I assume you'll come back for that, are we rolling that into this for the chemistry? If you're gonna do the chemical treatment, are we gonna roll that into this
I
there?
don't see why not.
Okay.
Unless there's a problem with it with the board, it's just some other process that
Right.
we're.
Well, and remind me, in the state of Massachusetts, it doesn't matter if you're certified, if you're working on your own property, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a moot point.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, going down to the local store and buying it over the counter, those people are usually much more harmful than the licensed people. When you come right down to it.
Okay,
Except there's a knowledge base in this case, so I feel comfortable with it.
yeah. Do you wanna talk about, did you do any of the math on the impervious stuff?
Yeah, it's all on here. Which map are you referring to?
So we've got 750 square foot driveway, and you wanna trade that for the 669?
Right now, there's a walkway here, that's 115, a driveway here that's 750. Zhuzh around the map a little bit, so that this will now be 669, and this will be 176.
And that's all outside of wetland buffer anyway, and so inside the wetland buffer, we're looking at a net decrease of impervious?
I don't think that's outside the buffer.
The 100-foot buffer?
This is the 100-foot right here.
Yeah, so you're not.
Yeah. There,
Oh, I see, well, I was
Yeah.
looking at that little place they're putting up front, so it's not all out, right? There's a
no,
little-
it's not all being
There's
removed,
one-
but
one-
it's a net decrease in the buffer, yes.
Well, it's no closer, and then the good thing, doesn't that driveway slope towards the river?
It does.
Yeah, so anything that lands on that driveway runs right towards the river now.
Yeah, which is
and-
gross.
Yeah, and we won't be doing that now, so
Which is lovely.
that's
Yeah.
that's a plus.
Well, looking at the pictures from above, people just parked anywhere on the lawn
It,
anyway.
well, it certainly looked like that, and I think they freely admitted that.
Yeah, so having designated parking is probably a good
It
thing.
is a good idea. The only thing I see on this plan that needs a little work is some
Mhm.
detail on the dock, that's all.
Okay.
It's just showing, showing an elevation, so you've got your heights above.
Okay.
Show your, how you're gonna tie it off, I don't know what you're gonna put in, whether you use duckbill, or whether you're gonna use some type of screw-in helical, or whether there are already, is there concrete in place already that they tied this off to when it was in? There is?
No, there's not.
No, I think those are.
No, they're just wooden posts right now,
Right.
4x4s.
Okay, so that's gotta go. Anything that is a wooden post 4x4 that is in the water, that water flows around it, those have got to go.
There's nothing in the water, it's only on the marsh.
Are you referring to like the moor?
Oh, yeah, no, the marsh part's fine, we're gonna do that 1.5,
Okay,
did you get that letter?
no,
Okay, you can take a look at it if you want,
Great.
we'll provide you with a copy of it.
lovely.
That is from, as a matter of fact, you can have that because I can print it right off my computer.
Oh,
It was
okay.
sent to me electronically.
Thank you.
I'm surprised they didn't send you one.
No.
And that pretty much tells you about the 1.5 to 1.
Okay.
I'm talking about the dock sections as they come down and they sit in the mud.
Oh,
And
yeah.
anything that's in the water, there
Mhm.
can't be any permanent posts in the water.
No, there are
No,
no
there-
permanent posts
okay,
in the water.
all right.
No. There are 4 existing concrete blocks, I
Okay,
believe,
All
and
right,
so
and
we
you-
have to.
you're gonna tie to those? All right.
Yep, we're just
All right.
gonna use them.
So there's no disturbance there.
No.
Those will have to be redesigned, I
Oh,
take it now, they
yeah.
just come down and sit in the mud. They're old enough that they didn't have legs on them, or they're not,
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
And you're gonna reuse those? Or are
The-
these gonna have to be constructed new, are these?
No, the ones on the end, they're in okay shape, but the decking needs to be
The
replaced.
decking, yeah, the top
These
decking needs
ones
to be
are, these ones are
replaced.
toast.
Okay.
Yeah, these, yeah,
So-
the floating section, the walkway out to the NT is junk.
Okay, so from here out, anything that sits on the mud
Mhm.
out here will have to be up on some type of table. Whether it's legs with a pad at the bottom, if the mud will support it or the material there will support it. If it's too soft, it's more like a skid. You can put a skid under one side, the
So-
sides of it.
We had discussed that in the meeting, and that's totally fine. I just could not find any specs for how to design or build them, for sizes on the pads,
Look,
anything like that.
CZM's Coastal Small Pier and Dock Guide, I think, will lay it all out for you.
Okay.
And I might have that title a little scrambled, but
Okay.
it's something like that.
All right,
Yeah.
because I did try to look so we could include
Oh,
something.
could I have that,
Oh,
please?
yes, of course. But I couldn't find anything to indicate how big the legs should be or where they should be placed, anything along those lines.
Oh, right there.
Oh,
It's DEP's guide. It's the last,
Okay.
middle of the last paragraph.
okay, lovely.
And does that differ from the substrate that they're landing on? If it's
Exactly.
mud or versus
Yes.
more sand?
Yeah, if a post with a, one foot round disc isn't enough, then yeah, you have to have some type of skid under there to support it a little more, a few more square inches of support.
Yeah,
So
Well,
whatever
we-
you think, I mean, if you step down in there and when you step back, you leave your boot behind, you're probably gonna need a skid. If you
Okay.
can step in there and it's a little bit sandy and it supports your feet, well, then a pad's probably gonna be enough.
we tend to have sandier because we're just a little further down the river. It's not like the muck you'd get at the boat ramp.
Yep, so maybe just some pads would suffice.
Okay, easy enough. And I assume it's 4, one at each corner.
Whatever you need to hold it, yeah, I mean, it
Okay.
needs to be up above, and from a practical standpoint, it still wants to be stable while it's up above. So, you want something that's gonna be stable for you, and if that takes the 4 corners, great. The way they pin together, maybe sometimes you could use, a couple and then a couple more. If you
Okay.
put 2 on the end of this one,
Mhm.
and this one pins to this one, and this one's got 2 on it,
Sure.
you know what I mean?
That's a lot of
You've actually
legs.
got them, so maybe
Yeah.
you wouldn't need 4 on each one, maybe 2 on each one would be enough.
Okay,
I'm gonna leave the design up to you folks.
easy enough.
Yeah, and just with the knotweed, if you do go the non-chemical route, if you do a really, really good job, it's gonna take about 5 years. So, that's the best case scenario I know about, is about 5 years, and maybe more likely to be something like 7. If you do end up doing that, I forget the term at the moment, but it really does, is very effective at discouraging other things to grow. The only thing,
Allelopathic.
thank you. I was stuck on phytotoxics. I was stuck on phytotoxics.
I did my thesis on allelopathy, so yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I've heard of that works for knotweed
Mhm.
is willows. And so, putting in some
We could
live stakes
incorporate
as you go
some-
along
yeah.
might help to sort of defend the territory that you're winning as you go. But if you do end up going the chemical route, the stem injection is much more effective and much easier, and it just, generally speaking, the percentages are better and you're less likely to make a mess. But, you know, yeah, I mean, like I said, good job. I wish you all the luck in the world, but those, yeah.
The ones that I've done in the past, it takes about 3 years to get full. We've gotten down to about 50%
Without chemical.
without chemical, 50% after about the first year, then down to 75, and then close to 100 after year 3. It's not pleasant, it takes work, but.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, the stuff I know doesn't do that well. I think probably because it was more volunteer oriented, and so a lot
They'll
of,
leave root fragments behind, and
Yeah.
it's tough.
fair enough. Well.
Do you guys have any other concerns?
Yeah.
Other than the redesign of the pier, I don't have any concerns with anything I see. I think obviously DEP needs to be satisfied in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I mean, like, they say, you know, most people.
Maybe when you get your supplemental information ready, you send it off to them with a little narrative that, you know, you've received their, what do they call it? Their project information, their NOI project information, this one here.
Oh, yeah.
You received that, and there was no DEP number, but there was no comments relative to why I didn't receive one. And that would be the Northeast region of Wilmington, would be right where you sent it, would be reviewing this, obviously.
I will tell you something, right? When I have a problem, I can.
What does it mean when they don't send comments back, but also?
I've never seen it. It's, you know, if you don't give a number, there's a reason you didn't give the number.
Right.
So, are you thinking of a color? You know, let me know what it is. I just, you know, we need to know what the color is, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, blank ones are great, you know,
Yeah.
there's nothing to talk about.
I
But
know,
blank
so-
ones without a number mean you didn't get a number.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so how do we, you know, how do we talk about this and discuss what the issues are?
So, based on that, I assume, everyone's done commenting, but I assume while we seem to be content with things, we don't wanna close contingent on because we haven't gotten a legitimate response from DEP.
I think there's too many
We need to
contingencies.
leave that open, yeah.
I don't see a reason to push it as long as the applicant's comfortable with a continuance and straighten out the issues over the next month and show up here April 16th, is it, the next regularly scheduled meeting?
Oh, we must be calling early today, yeah.
Is that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then I will make a motion to that effect, that we continue this hearing until the April 16th date.
Wait a second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Lovely. We'll see you
Doug,
guys.
what do you need back?
Both, oh no, I don't need that, you can keep that, I can
Okay.
reproduce that. This, we should, you just did this you just looked up online, right, and
Yeah,
printed
that
this
was
out?
just today.
Okay, then you can have both these,
Oh,
if
thank
you
you.
want, we can reproduce them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
That's a very odd thing to do. It's so weird.
You mean the comment letter?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought so too, like I said, I've never seen one like that. Maybe it was just a mistake, you know, maybe they just,
So should I call them?
you can call them and ask to speak to the reviewer, that reviewed this particular project.
Do they give the reviewer on?
They used to, but I don't think they do. You'll end up with the main desk and you'll likely get a call back.
See that? Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so then, moving right along.
Hey, we didn't write much off the agenda, did we?
We have one extension permit for Livingston Development on Larkin Road / Parish Road Culvert, which is DP number 050-1213. And would you like to?
Yeah, obviously about 3 years ago, because that's how they run, the people that are developing the project that's on the corner, on Larkin, where Larkin doglegs and goes down towards the bridge, there was an old farmhouse right in front of there with multiple acres. And they've been negotiating with Georgetown for quite some time about a development in there. They seem to be getting closer. There is some concern that they've pared the numbers down so much that it might not pay off, but I'm getting a little long-winded here. I'll get to the culvert. Part of it is that this culvert, that is a dead-end street right now because the culvert failed that was in place, And this was a permit for a replacement culvert that would be a requirement of the developer prior to getting occupancy on his development.
Okay.
So it would be my recommendation that we grant a extension to the Livingston Development Locken Road / Parish Road Culvert, DEP number 50-1213.
Just a question on the culvert.
Sure.
We'll do this before we do the, yeah. Was this already extended by any chance? Is this one of these old?
No, this is the first extension
Okay.
on this, yep.
How's the culvert, seems okay from the beginning? Like it was a nice culvert?
Yeah, well, what we've got in there now looks like they took a couple of telephone poles and put them down at the bottom. I mean, it looks like the farmer's been, great job. I mean, it lasted for years, but it truly looks like the farmer's built it and put it together. So what you've got now is you've got a modern bottomless box
Okay.
with a natural bed in the bottom, and you know they've taken into consideration the bank widths there. And they couldn't. They've got big areas on both sides that have kind of impoundments, so they really couldn't move that back far enough to go full bank width, you know, 1.5 times or 1.2 times, I guess it is, bank width. But they've done a great job with what they've had to work with.
Fair enough. I just was, not knowing anything, I wanted to make sure that this wasn't one of those projects that got, extended automatically and extended automatically by the governor's.
The Permit Extension Act, and then the
Yeah.
son of the Permit Extension Act, yeah.
And that it's a culvert that was designed 10 years ago,
Yeah.
15 years ago, that wouldn't meet spec.
Not the case,
Yeah.
yeah, not the case.
Cool. Anyway, so we have a motion, yes?
Yes.
All right,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
When you said that they were still in discussion with the other town, I was just like, oh, no.
Well, I hope it goes through now. I hope they've left enough money in the budget to be able to address this. It would be nice, because it gives the town of Newbury a new bridge down there. Although most of the people that live down there are really happy the way it is now.
Funny how that works.
All right. Well, then, at that point, we were just on to other business, and Doug, you got the one thing to talk about.
Yeah, we finally got the modified document from Lisa Mead's office for the sign-off of the Colby Village Foundation. I don't know how many of you remember it, but was it 15 years ago, Rachel? I don't know. You weren't around then, were you? Quite some time.
I wasn't that involved.
Yeah, quite some time ago.
You're around though.
Yeah, I was around.
Colby Village came in and they went for an OSRD, an open space residential development. As part of getting benefit and extra lots, they did some preservation. And one of it was the farmhouse that was there, the planning board wanted the foundation to be saved. So they took the house off it, they had filled it with topsoil, and they just kind of left the bricks sticking up. Well, 5 years later, I don't need to tell you what happened to that. The frost got into that, and it's just blown it all apart. So it's really become more of a danger and a nuisance than it has a historical or an artifact. They have come before the town to remove that foundation. Commission voted to allow it to be removed, and this is the document that modifies the conservation restriction on the property.
So we need a motion or anything, or we just have to sign?
No, we don't. We've already voted on
Yeah.
it, so.
I remember, that was
That was
like one of my first meetings.
It was a while ago, yeah.
Yeah.
When was your first meeting? Like September?
Rachel's not even on there.
6 or 7 months
Yeah.
ago.
No.
That's good. I don't really remember.
Just find your name and sign away. What'll happen with this now is this will.
My name doesn't have a member, that's just me.
Oh.
Wow.
I'm
You're just a citizen observer.
I like that. And look at this, I gotta use the chair, that's wrong.
Well, just today.
No, you didn't do too bad a job.
No, not too bad, but bad enough.
Well, no, I don't think you did it bad enough to be rejected yet.
We'll leave that open.
That's what you were shooting for, you failed.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, you want me to show off a little bit? I can.
Oh, no, please don't hurt us.
come in wearing, put my like braids in or like different color hair, and, like one arm's like in my sweater.
It's okay,
I can
we're not prejudiced.
twitch, I can talk backwards. And,
That would be interesting. What are we doing now then, Chief?
yeah, so let's talk about our work group.
I approached Lisa about having a work group, allowing us just to meet as a group and go over some of the information that I have, that many of you don't, because I've been here for so long, and we'd certainly I'd like to pass it on. So Tracy was a little concerned about leaving us on our own relative to the open meeting law. So she would like Lisa Mead or someone from her office present, which would probably be Brian Winter, because he's the conservation or the environmental guy in that office. But he would come that night and he could start the meeting and everything, but then the meeting would be ours, not theirs. So
What's the concern?
the concern is that potentially, let's say we get wandering off on a tangent and all of a sudden we're talking about Old Road. Or we bring up a file that is current, or we talk about business that's before us. That's the concern, when you just start, kind of jarring around the table, I think.
Yeah.
We've done them before, and I've been involved in them before, but if they want someone here, it's okay. I don't care, it doesn't matter one way or the other. And so what I'd like tonight is maybe for 2 or 3 potential dates that we could meet over the next month, and then I can give them to Mead's office, and we can kind of match up a time and date.
Should we do that over email or with all the members of the dates, or do you want to try getting them down now?
Do you know how to do a doodle poll?
I can figure it out.
Yeah,
Right.
you can
Maybe
figure it out. It's not-
maybe we ought to try a doodle poll and send it out to the board, and then at the same time, we could send it out to Lisa's office. Maybe that'd be the easiest, the best way to do it, instead of trying to bounce all
Yeah,
around.
just with like
Yeah.
so many members out
But
or
like,
whatever. And it's
just in
not-
terms of, do we want to do you want to stay with Tuesdays because you're trained to show up for content stuff on Tuesdays, or does it not matter to folks?
Tuesdays are a big meeting day, so we wouldn't necessarily have this room. There's a lot of other boards that use this time.
Library or?
So,
There's a lot of people are using the library lately too.
so would it be the better question be like, what's a good day that other boards generally don't meet?
I don't think we even necessarily need to, do an after hours thing.
Well, if you
Can it
wanted,
happen during work hours?
well, how about we could do it during work hours, or how about if we went a first, second, or fourth Tuesday, and it's just the board and someone, we could have one of the smaller rooms, we're not being accompanied by anybody, so.
Yeah.
It's
we
not
could-
open to the public.
Well, it can be, but it's not, that's not the intent of it at all, it's not
It's
intended
it's
to be a public.
working
Yes, it's just a work meeting.
Well, the planning board did that, and we did publish it, and have it open, we did it on a Saturday morning. But it was just to cover ourselves, so if anybody wanted to come and listen to us drone on about bylaws, they were welcome to do so.
Okay.
But we did it because we just needed, to be able to talk with one another about, amending some town bylaws and get input from everybody, so, and not have it at the end of a meeting where you're already burned out from something else.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, so.
So you were talking about real town business, though, you're putting together bylaws and discussing.
Yeah, but just, we posted it anyway, just,
Right.
To cover everything. And it
This
went
is
forward.
real time business too, listening to you
Yes,
rattle on about
exactly.
all your expertise.
Please.
I mean, it's similar, you're just trying to catch everybody up and
Yeah.
get on the same page so you can.
Well, I'll give you one little example. There are no less than at least 4 authorities going on right now on Plum Island, and we're talking about multi-million-dollar projects that probably none of you even know about. There's a 103 going on, which is a storm prevention study from the center down. There's a 204 going on, which is beneficial reuse of the material in the Merrimack River. There's an 8499 going on, which is the replacement of the material that we put on from the first dredging, lost to a storm after we were actively maintaining the beach, because it becomes a structure once it's put on the beach. It's a storm damage prevention structure. So that's going on, and then there's probably 750,000 cubic yards that are in the wings up at Piscataqua River, ready to come down and be dumped in the near shore. So, and then you've got your stuff that's going on behind the island on the Great Marsh. You've got the grants that are floating around right now, potential grants. You've got one for the Locken Dam. There's one that we're going to support from Greg Moore for the University of New Hampshire, which is another dune planting type one. So there's a ton of stuff going on, never mind the historical stuff as to how do you do a project when it says you can't affect the vegetation on Plum Island in the document, but you obviously do when you build a structure down there. How does that happen? And so there's a whole potpourri of stuff that is just things that have been negotiated over time with DEP, like that 2-foot separation. If you went to look for that, you cannot find that anywhere.
So this would be a great example of Doug and I have had a conversation going that I'm interested in perhaps using the bylaw to build regulations that basically are all these things that he knows that we don't, or like that 2-foot thing. Why don't we just put it in the regs so that it's upfronted, because we're all going to agree on it anyway. It's sort of standard practice, but if you get a new builder who comes into town or a new resident that moves in and wants to know things, at least put it somewhere where they can find it, so it's not just policy, like policy doesn't.
You have it in the bylaw.
Well, and the other
protect
thing,
your town.
well, the other thing you might have heard me say the other night, Bill Barrett comes in and they've got this application to build down to right within 2 feet. It says, there's just a structure and it says minimum 2 feet. And then you look at the topography and they're building in a bowl, all right? So they're gonna frame this whole house up. They're gonna build in this bowl. They're gonna have their lowest horizontal member set at 2 feet, and then they're gonna walk around on the sides for the next 6 months and build this house. And next thing you know, you're gonna have 20 inches under that corner. And we can't sign off on it. And then what do? You can't mechanically move that sand out of the way. You can't lift the house. What are you gonna do?
Right.
Right. So,
But yeah.
And even when the board considers 2 feet, you may have heard me at the last meeting say to him, I want to see this at 30 inches, because I know darn right well by the time you're done, you're going to be looking at 2 feet.
No. I mean, is this conversation, is that example an excuse to say, 2 feet above the average grade of the property?
Well, the average grade of the property might...
I mean, because dunes, all over the place.
I think what you'd want to say is adjacent grade.
I mean,
So
choice of
if
language, right,
if adjacent grade is within, 3 feet or 4 feet of the construction and on the footprint, well, you can be sure guys are gonna be walking on that slope and probably knocking some of it down and some of it underneath. If it's flat, like the one that was on, was it Harvard Way? Pretty flat lot with a big rise on the back. Well, you don't want it 2 feet above that big rise in the back, because the lot's fairly flat. So, it's sort of a site-specific kind of
And
determination.
the other thing too is this, and this is the reason for the work group really, is this within our jurisdiction? I mean, because it's house building stuff, right? We talk about wetlands and.
Yeah, but it's within our jurisdiction because
The island thing is just so.
yeah, but we're not talking about the raising of a house. We're not talking about forcing a house on pilings. We're talking about the resource area under the house. And so we're concerned with dune movement and scour. So we're lifting it for dune movement. We're not lifting it for flood, which is out of our purview. That's the building inspector.
Right.
We're not lifting it for the V-zone, for those issues. That's building inspector. He's got to be a certain height above the V-zone. We are 2 feet above the closest point, no matter what it is.
Interesting.
I mean, even if you're in the X zone, you're still 2 feet above that closest point.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so yeah.
So I had, sort of a parallel thing, I suggested to Doug, we take a look at the Newbury port has it's not a I think they have regulations too, but this is just, it's
Guidance document,
checklist
maybe?
or, you know, typical procedures for a Plum Island application. I think it's good just to avoid having stuff, you know, come up here and there's like, well, you don't have this, you don't have this, you don't have
Yeah,
this.
the more you front load, the more they come in prepared, and it's a one and done as opposed to it taking 3 months of.
Continuing,
So, you
continuing,
know,
continuing.
maybe take a look at, it's, you know, on the City of Newburyport website, I looked at the Ipswich one. That's just a application checklist, you know, stuff that you have to include with the, they've got a townwide bylaw, so they can kind of dictate a little bit more what goes on and across the whole town. But then I was looking at, this is the, our wetland bylaw from Plum Island. And we had talked about something about that, I think they're here at 50%, right?
50% what? As it regards to what?
Well, there's something in here where it's 50% when you got a, I think it's, I thought it was you have to go up on pilings, but.
Well, yes, 50% fair market value of improvement, you go up on pilings, but that's not our regulation. That is in 780 CMR, that's the state building code. If it's in our regulation, maybe you have an older copy where it didn't get struck. Now, Newburyport has
Well, I was just curious, but, you know, I think, rather than go into the particulars here, my question is our bylaw even, I mean, there are problems with the bylaw. Sounds like that particular thing is not, it needs to be changed.
Yeah, I don't know of any 50% within the bylaw that is not supposed to be in there unless it's something that went in before it went to the, or an old copy before it went to the Attorney
I just
General.
downloaded it from the
Okay.
town website, so. I'll just see.
Oh, it's the other things that we wanna talk about. So, do we want maybe to, like, every member just send in their concerns, like, when you guys build out an agenda and we, like, throw that together so that we all don't, we don't do ourselves, so we don't just prattle on about whatever comes to our
Oh, it'll be the
mind.
Tower of Babel if we don't, so I think that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
You
So,
can make Brian your facilitator as well.
hey, I'm in a mean, tight meeting. Keep you all in mind.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
We were done at 7:45.
I was gonna say, I thought this was gonna be the
Yeah,
shortest meeting.
Mr. Mean Tight Meeting, we were done at 7:45.
I'm not doing the chit chat over here. Labrador.
Fair enough.
All right, so it sounds like we've got a plan then.
Yes,
Excellent.
we'll have, see if Jen can put together a doodle poll for us, send it out to all the parties and see if we can match up some dates.
Great. So then, at this point, unless anybody else has anything they'd like to add, did you find your 50%?
No,
You want me to wait on you?
no, maybe I was dreaming.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion to close this meeting.
So moved.
Next,
I figured I'd done enough of
Seconded.
them, I was gonna
All
just
right.
kinda wait and see if.
all in favor?